The restaurant fell silent as the child's screams reached a crescendo. Judgmental eyes turned to the corner table, where the billionaire desperately tried calming his autistic son. Nothing worked. The whispers grew louder. Then she appeared, a waitress who shouldn't have been in their section. With fingers precisely positioned in a pattern only elite military operators would recognize, she made a single gesture. The boy stopped instantly, eyes locked on her hands. The father's expression shifted from embarrassment to shock as realization dawned. Who was this woman? What did she know about his son? From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story intrigued you, consider subscribing for more powerful narratives that reveal extraordinary moments hiding in ordinary lives. The sommelier at Aurelia moved between tables with practiced precision, presenting a bottle of Chateau Lafite Rothschild to appreciative nods from San Francisco's tech elite. At $1,200 a bottle, it was expected. What wasn't expected was Thaddeus Kincaid, choosing tonight of all nights to bring his son to the restaurant. Thaddeus guided 9-year-old Lysander through the main dining room, ignoring the subtle shifts in posture as conversations paused briefly. The maitre d' hesitated before leading them to a corner table, far from the center of the room. "Is this acceptable, Mr. Kincaid?" The question carried an unmistakable subtext. "It's perfect," Thaddeus replied, helping Lysander into his seat. "Thank you." At 42, Thaddeus had revolutionized quantum encryption, building Kincaid's security into a $40 billion empire. His rare public appearances typically involve product launches or investor meetings, never family dinners, especially not with Lysander. "Today is special, Ly," Thaddeus whispered as they settled in. 3 years since you came home with me." Lysander didn't respond verbally. Instead, his fingers meticulously arranged the silverware, aligning each piece at perfect right angles. His wooden puzzle box, a constant companion, sat beside his water glass. At the adjacent table, a venture capitalist leaned toward his companion. "Shouldn't there be facilities for people like that?" The words weren't quite hushed enough. Thaddeus pretended not to hear. He'd grown accustomed to such comments in the 3 years since the adoption agency had placed Lysander with him. A special case, they'd called him, with paperwork that seemed unusually expedited for a billionaire seeking a quiet adoption. "Background?" Thaddeus had asked then. "Unremarkable," the agency director had assured him. "Abandoned at 4. No family history available." Watching Lysander now, Thaddeus noted the careful way his son's eyes tracked movement throughout the restaurant, cataloging, processing, analyzing. Despite being diagnosed with autism, Lysander showed moments of awareness that seemed almost preternatural. The sommelier approached their table. "Sir, would you care for wine this evening?" "Just sparkling water for both of us, thank you," Thaddeus replied, noticing how Lysander tensed slightly at the stranger's proximity. Across the dining room, a couple celebrated an anniversary with quiet intimacy. Near the windows, tech executives discussed acquisition strategies over foie gras. The restaurant hummed with privileged conversation, wealth speaking to wealth in hushed, respectful tones. Aurelia wasn't just a restaurant. It was a temple to success where the elite performed rituals of power disguised as dinner. Lysander remained focused on his puzzle box, fingers working the sliding wooden panels with mathematical precision. Thaddeus had given it to him on their first night together, and it had rarely left the boy's possession since. "Your appetizers, sir," a server announced, placing delicate plates before them. Lysander didn't look up, even as the aroma of truffle and saffron filled the air between them. Thaddeus cut a small piece of his dish and placed it on Lysander's plate, careful not to disturb the arrangement of utensils. "Try this, Ly. It's that butternut squash you liked at home." For a moment, everything seemed peaceful. Thaddeus allowed himself to relax slightly to imagine this as the first of many normal outings they might share. Progress, he thought. Small steps toward a semblance of ordinary life. The illusion shattered when a busboy dropped a tray nearby. The crash of breaking glass cut through the restaurant's ambient noise like a thunderclap. Lysander flinched violently, his hand striking his puzzle box, knocking it to the floor where it broke open. Something metallic slid out, a dog tag on a chain. Thaddeus stared, confusion clouding his features. He'd inventoried every item in that box when it had become Lysander's comfort object. The tag had never been there. As Thaddeus reached for it, Lysander's breathing changed, becoming shallow and rapid. His pupils dilated. His fingers began to curl inward. Lie? It's okay. Deep breaths, remember? Thaddeus attempted their usual calming routine, but Lysander's eyes remained fixed on the dog tag. Then it began, a high, piercing scream that cut through the ambient restaurant noise like a knife. Conversations stopped. Wine glasses paused mid-toast. Every head turned toward their table. Thaddeus tried pressure techniques, counting exercises, redirection, all the methods that had worked before. Nothing helped. Lysander's screams intensified, his body rigid with distress. A woman at a nearby table whispered loudly to her companion, "Some people simply shouldn't be in public." Another diner caught Thaddeus's eye and mimed a drinking motion, suggesting Lysander's behavior resulted from poor parenting rather than neurodevelopmental differences. Thaddeus felt the familiar mixture of frustration and protectiveness rising within him. He'd faced these judgments before, the silent condemnations from people who couldn't begin to understand. Perhaps Sir would be more comfortable elsewhere, the manager suggested, materializing beside their table with a tight smile. "I'm sorry," Thaddeus said, reaching for Lysander's coat. "We'll go." That's when he noticed her, a waitress moving through the restaurant with this unusual efficiency. Not their server, not from their section at all. She navigated the space with something beyond practiced skill, tactical awareness. Her eyes met Thaddeus's, and in that moment, he saw recognition flash across her features. Not recognition of him, Thaddeus Kincaid was well known enough, but recognition of Lysander. As the whispers around them grew louder, Thaddeus noticed a man in the corner speaking discreetly into his cuff. The waitress noticed too, her posture subtly shifting. She moved toward their table, her scarred hands betraying a history inconsistent with restaurant work. Lysander screamed louder as she approached, as if trying desperately to communicate something only she would understand. The restaurant had fallen to a tense hush, broken only by Lysander's continued screams. The waitress, her name tag read Azriel, positioned herself between their table and the man in the corner. "Sir," she addressed Thaddeus with quiet authority that cut through Lysander's cries. "May I?" Before Thaddeus could respond, Azriel moved her hands into position, fingers splayed in a specific configuration, thumb locked at a precise angle. It wasn't American Sign Language or any civilian communication system Thaddeus recognized. Lysander's screaming stopped instantly, his eyes locked onto her hands with laser focus. To Thaddeus's astonishment, Lysander's hands began moving in response, forming different but equally precise configurations. They engaged in a silent conversation lasting seconds, the restaurant collectively holding its breath. "What?" Thaddeus began. Azriel leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. "Project Starling. He was Subject 7. I was his handler." The words hit Thaddeus like a physical blow. 3 years of questions suddenly crystallized. Lysander's unusual pattern recognition, his difficulty with verbal communication, contrasted with his mathematical brilliance, the expedited adoption that bypassed usual protocols. "I don't understand," Thaddeus whispered, though part of him already did. Azriel's eyes never left Lysander as she continued. "The adoption wasn't random, Mr. Kincaid. He was placed with you deliberately. Someone with resources, someone who wouldn't ask too many questions about a child with special needs." She nodded toward the dog tag on the floor. "That contains a tracking chip that just activated. They've found him." The man from the corner table was now standing, touching his earpiece while maintaining casual posture, the stance of someone communicating with a team. "Who are they?" Thaddeus asked, his protective instincts flaring. "The Department of Advanced Cognitive Development," Azriel replied. "Officially, they don't exist. Unofficially, they've been developing communication protocols for children with unique neurological profiles. Children who process patterns differently." Lysander made another hand movement. Azriel responded immediately, then turned back to Thaddeus. "He wasn't just autistic, Mr. Kincaid. His neurological structure allows him to recognize patterns that would take supercomputers hours to process. The program started as observation only, but when they began pushing for cognitive enhancement procedures," she stopped, a shadow crossing her features. "I got him out." The approaching man was now 10 feet away, his intent clear in his movement. Azriel subtly shifted her sleeve, revealing a military-grade scar on her wrist as she made another hand signal to Lysander. To Thaddeus's shock, Lysander spoke, not in his usual halting manner, but in a clear, precise voice, reciting what sounded like coordinates, followed by a string of alphanumeric codes. The approaching man froze, recognition flashing across his face. "He just gave us access to secure files that would take the NSA months to crack," Azriel explained quietly. "That's what they want him for. That's why they'll never stop looking." The restaurant manager appeared again, tension radiating from his forced smile. "Is everything all right here?" "No," Thaddeus replied, making his decision in that moment. "My son isn't feeling well. We need to leave immediately, through the kitchen, if possible." "Sir, I'm not sure that's—" "There's a $10,000 tip for your staff if you make it happen now," Thaddeus interrupted, never taking his eyes off Azriel. The manager's objection melted away. "Of course, sir. This way." As they stood, Thaddeus gathered Lysander's puzzle box and the dog tag, slipping both into his pocket. The man with the earpiece moved to follow, but was intercepted by waitstaff responding to the manager's subtle signal. Azriel led them through the kitchen, past startled chefs, and through a service door that opened into an alley. "We have maybe 5 minutes before extraction teams arrive," she said, checking the street. "You have a choice, Mr. Kincaid. You can go back to your life, knowing they are now aware of Lysander's location, or what?" Thaddeus challenged. "Or you come with me and learn the truth about your son's abilities, about what he can do, about what they'll do to get him back." Thaddeus looked at Lysander, who was now calm, his eyes moving between Azriel and his father with unusual clarity. "Do you know her, Ly? Do you trust her?" Thaddeus asked softly. Lysander nodded once, definitively. "Then so do I," Thaddeus said, taking Lysander's hand. "Lead the way." Azriel led them through back alleys with the confident navigation of someone who had memorized every possible escape route. Thaddeus followed, keeping Lysander close as they moved swiftly through the shadows of San Francisco's financial district. "My car is 3 blocks south," Thaddeus said. "Underground parking, private elevator." "Too predictable," Azriel replied without slowing. "They'll have surveillance on all registered vehicles." She guided them to a nondescript sedan parked in a service alley. As she approached, the lights flashed once without her touching a key fob. "Biometric recognition?" Thaddeus asked, professional interest momentarily overriding the urgency of their situation. "Something like that," Azriel answered, opening the rear door. "Get in." Thaddeus hesitated. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere they won't look immediately," she replied, glancing at her watch. "We have a 4-minute window before facial recognition picks us up on city cameras." Thaddeus helped Lysander into the back seat before sliding in beside him. Azriel took the driver's position, the engine starting with just the touch of her hand to the steering wheel. "Your security systems," she said, as they pulled onto the street, driving at precisely the speed limit to avoid attention. "How comprehensive are they?" "Military grade," Thaddeus replied. "My company specializes in quantum encryption." "I know what your company does," Azriel said, making a turn that took them toward the Bay Bridge. "I'm asking if your residential security could withstand a federal-level breach team." Thaddeus considered this. The Sausalito property might. It has underwater access points and a Faraday cage built into the central rooms. Azriel nodded, checking the mirrors with practiced vigilance. "That's where we're going. I need you to call ahead. Normal voice, normal routine. Tell your security team you're bringing guests for a late dinner. They'll run background checks," Thaddeus warned. "Let them," Azriel replied. "The identity I'm using will pass anything less than a level 5 clearance search." As Thaddeus made the call, Lysander remained unusually calm in the back seat. His eyes focused on Azriel's hands on the steering wheel. Occasionally, his own fingers would twitch in what Thaddeus now recognized as abbreviated versions of the hand signals he had witnessed in the restaurant. 20 minutes later, they passed through 3 separate security checkpoints before reaching Thaddeus's Sausalito home. A modernist structure of glass and steel perched on a cliff overlooking the bay. Despite the circumstances, Thaddeus felt a surge of relief as the massive security doors sealed behind them. Inside, Azriel immediately began checking sightlines and exit points, her movements revealing years of tactical training. Thaddeus led Lysander to his room, helping him settle into familiar surroundings, before returning to find Azriel examining his home security interface. "Your system is impressive," she conceded, "but it won't hold them forever." "Before we go any further," Thaddeus said, leaning against his kitchen counter, "I need to understand exactly what's happening. Who are you? What is Project Starling? And what does my son have to do with it?" Azriel turned from the security panel. In the restaurant, she had maintained the practiced anonymity of service staff. Here, in the stark lighting of his home, Thaddeus could see her more clearly. The faded scar along her hairline, the hypervigilant set of her shoulders, the calluses on her hands that spoke of weapons training rather than carrying trays. "My name is Azriel Thorne, former Navy intelligence attached to SEAL team operations in non-standard communication development. 8 years ago, I was recruited for a classified project developing alternative communication protocols for special operations." "KOHL," Thaddeus said. "The hand signals." Azriel nodded. "Kinetic operational hand language, designed for environments where electronic communications are compromised or impossible. The program was successful, but limited by how quickly operatives could learn the system." She moved to the window, checking the perimeter again before continuing. "That's when someone had the idea to study individuals with neurological differences that might predispose them to pattern recognition, particularly children with certain types of autism." "Project Starling," Thaddeus supplied. "Yes, initially observational, studying how these children naturally processed and created patterns. But when they discovered subjects like Lysander, children who could not only learn the system but improve upon it, the program changed." Thaddeus felt cold dread settling in his stomach. Changed how? "They began selecting for specific cognitive traits, placing the children in controlled environments, introducing neurostimulation techniques to enhance pattern recognition abilities." Azriel's expression hardened. 3 years ago, they approved invasive cognitive enhancement procedures." "Surgery?" Thaddeus asked, horrified. "Among other things," Azriel replied grimly. "I extracted Lysander the night before his procedure was scheduled, arranged his placement with you through contacts in the adoption system. He was supposed to disappear into normal life." Thaddeus processed this information, pieces falling into place. "Why me specifically?" "Your work in quantum encryption made you an ideal candidate, someone with resources who might inadvertently enhance Lysander's abilities, or whose work might benefit from his natural talents." She paused. "And someone with enough power and money to make traditional investigation difficult. But they found him anyway," Thaddeus said, glancing toward Lysander's room. The dog tag contained a dormant tracker. Standard protocol for all subjects, inactive unless specifically pinged by a central system. Azriel's fingers unconsciously traced the scar on her hairline. "They're initiating recovery protocols." A quiet voice interrupted their conversation. "Handler Thorne." Both adults turned to find Lysander standing in the doorway, his posture different than Thaddeus had ever seen it. More controlled, almost military in its precision. "Subject 7, Azriel responded, her voice softening slightly. Lysander's hands moved in the complex patterns of KOHL. Azriel watched intently, responding with equally precise movements. "What is he saying?" Thaddeus asked. "He says the others are awake too." "He can feel them," Azriel translated. "He's asking about Subject 4. There are others like him?" 12 successfully completed the program before I extracted Lysander, Azriel explained. 4 remain in the program. 7 have been recovered and placed in civilian homes, like Lysander. "And Subject 4? A shadow crossed Azriel's features. "My daughter. Biologically, she was born into the program. Her father was the program director. When I extracted Lysander, I had to leave her behind." She swallowed hard. "She's still there." The revelation hung in the air between them, shifting Thaddeus's understanding of Azriel's motivations. "You're not just a handler who grew a conscience," Thaddeus said slowly. "You're a mother trying to save her child." "I'm both," Azriel replied evenly. "And I need your help to finish what I started." Before Thaddeus could respond, the security system emitted a soft warning tone. Azriel moved instantly to the panel. "Perimeter breach," she reported. "Eastern quadrant. They're faster than I expected." Thaddeus joined her at the monitor, watching as figures moved through the wooded area surrounding his property. "Those aren't local police. Department Tactical Team," Azrael confirmed. "We have maybe 10 minutes before they breach the house." Thaddeus felt adrenaline surge through his system. "The panic room. It's beneath the study, fully secured, separate ventilation." "That buys us hours, not freedom," Azrael countered. "We need to move, not hide." "The water access," Thaddeus said. "There's a tunnel from the wine cellar to a boathouse on the shoreline. Security doesn't know about it. It's not in any blueprint." Azrael's eyes narrowed. "Why would a tech billionaire need a secret escape tunnel?" "Privacy has always been my business," Thaddeus replied. "And sometimes my clients include people who need to move discreetly." For the first time, something like approval flashed across Azrael's features. "Show me." Thaddeus led them to the wine cellar, Lysander following without hesitation. At the back, behind a rack of rare vintages, a biometric scanner was concealed in what appeared to be an antique thermometer. "Lysander's biometrics are in the system too," Thaddeus explained, placing his palm against the scanner. A section of wall slid silently aside, revealing a narrow concrete passage illuminated by recessed lighting. "Smart," Azrael commented. "What kind of transport is at the other end?" "A boat with satellite navigation capabilities," Thaddeus replied. "Where are we going?" "First to secure temporary shelter," Azrael said as they entered the passage. "Then to retrieve the evidence we need to shut down the program permanently." As the hidden door closed behind them, Lysander tugged at Thaddeus's sleeve. When his father looked down, the boy formed a series of hand signals, simpler than the ones he had exchanged with Azrael. "What is he saying?" Thaddeus asked. Azrael watched the movements. "He's creating a simplified version of KOHL for you. He wants you to understand him." Something tightened in Thaddeus's chest, emotion welling up unexpected and powerful. For 3 years, he had tried everything to connect with his son: specialists, therapies, technologies. Nothing had bridged the gap between them. "Can you teach me?" he asked Lysander directly. The boy nodded, making the first signal again, slower this time. "That means safety," Azrael translated. "It's the first sign taught to all subjects." Thaddeus mimicked the movement, his fingers arranging themselves in the pattern Lysander had shown. "Safety." Lysander made another sign. "Family," Azrael translated. Thaddeus repeated this movement too, watching how his son's eyes followed the pattern with intense focus. "You're a quick study," Azrael commented as they continued down the tunnel. "So is he," Thaddeus replied, understanding for the first time just how much he had underestimated his son. They reached the end of the tunnel, where it opened into a small boathouse. A sleek vessel was docked inside, its design suggesting speed rather than comfort. "Where to?" Thaddeus asked as he helped Lysander aboard. Azrael took the controls with practiced ease. "I have a safe house in Billionaire. We'll regroup there, gather supplies, then head inland where satellite surveillance is less effective." As they pulled away from the dock, Lysander positioned himself at the bow, his eyes scanning the horizon with unusual focus. Thaddeus moved to join him. "Are you okay, Ly?" he asked gently. In response, Lysander made the sign for safety, followed by the sign for family, adding a third movement Thaddeus didn't recognize. "What's that one?" he asked Azrael, who was navigating them into open water. "Promise," she translated without looking back. "He's saying safety, family, promise." Thaddeus felt something shift within him, a resolution forming. Whatever came next, whatever danger they faced, he would protect his son, not just from those pursuing them, but from a world that had never truly seen him for who he was. "I promise," Thaddeus said aloud, repeating the hand sign as Lysander had shown him. Behind them, the lights of San Francisco began to fade as they sped north along the coastline, 3 fugitives bound together by secrets and silent language, moving through darkness toward an uncertain dawn. 1 week later, dawn broke over a remote cliffside property on the Oregon coast, the Safe House, owned through a shell company Thaddeus had established years ago for privacy, offered sweeping ocean views and, more importantly, security. Inside, Lysander sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by papers covered in complex sequences that resembled both mathematical formulas and musical notation. His fingers moved through the now familiar hand signals as Azrael watched from a respectful distance. "It's called kinetic operational hand language," she explained to Thaddeus as they observed. KOHL, developed initially for special operations in electromagnetically compromised environments where traditional comms fail. Project Starling adapted it for the neurological profiles of children like Lysander. Thaddeus nodded, the week's revelations still settling into place. And there are others? Azrael crossed to a metal case, entering a complex sequence to unlock it. Inside were files, actual paper files, nothing digital that could be traced. She spread photographs across the table, children of various ages, each with a numeric designation rather than a name. 12 successfully completed the program before I extracted Lysander, she said. 7 have been recovered by the department. 4 remain in controlled facilities. 1 besides Lysander made it to civilian placement. Why Lysander? Why me? Thaddeus asked, the question that had been burning since their escape. Azrael's expression softened slightly. You created quantum encryption algorithms that even the NSA couldn't break. You built your fortune on pattern recognition systems. They placed him with you, hoping your work might inadvertently enhance his abilities, or that his abilities might enhance your work. I never knew, Thaddeus whispered, the guilt evident in his voice. That was the point, Azrael replied. The best asset is one who doesn't know they're an asset. On the floor, Lysander had arranged the papers into a perfect spiral pattern. He looked up at his father and made a sequence of hand movements. What did he say? Thaddeus asked. He said the others are calling to him. Azrael translated, concern creasing her brow. The tracking signal in that dog tag wasn't just to find him, it was to activate him. They're initiating recovery protocols for all subjects. She moved to the window, scanning the horizon with practiced vigilance. We have maybe 3 days before they triangulate this location. Lysander's abilities make him uniquely valuable, but also detectable when he uses them. Then we move, Thaddeus said decisively. I have resources, properties they don't know about. We can stay ahead of them. Azrael shook her head. Running isn't the answer, not long term. They'll never stop looking. What's the alternative? She turned from the window, determination hardening her features. We shut down the program permanently. We extract the remaining subjects. We expose what they've been doing. That's impossible, Thaddeus argued, if they're as powerful as you say. It's not impossible with him, Azrael nodded toward Lysander, and your resources, and my knowledge of their protocols. Her hand unconsciously moved to the scar along her hairline, evidence of her own history with the program. Lysander approached them, making another series of hand signals directly to his father. Thaddeus shook his head. I don't understand, Ly. Azrael watched as Lysander took his father's hands, positioning his fingers in the beginning of a KOHL sequence. He wants to teach you, she said quietly. He's offering you a way to understand him. Thaddeus felt emotion constrict his throat as he allowed his son to guide his fingers into position. For 3 years, he'd tried everything to connect with Lysander, specialists, therapies, technologies. Nothing had bridged the gap. Now, in the aftermath of danger and revelation, his son was offering him the key to a door Thaddeus hadn't even known existed. I want to learn, Thaddeus said, his voice thick with emotion. Lysander's face brightened with something rarely seen, a genuine smile. His hands moved again, forming a complex sequence. What did he say? Thaddeus asked Azrael. She watched the interaction with a mixture of professional assessment and unexpected warmth. He said, Then we begin. The next hours passed in focused concentration as Lysander guided his father through the fundamentals of KOHL. Thaddeus, with his background in pattern algorithms, proved an apt student, quickly grasping the mathematical underpinnings of the system. The gestures aren't just signs, Azrael explained, as she prepared surveillance equipment near the window. They're algorithms expressed physically. Each movement corresponds to a specific computational function. That's why children like Lysander excel at it, Thaddeus realized. Their brains are already wired to recognize and create these patterns. Azrael nodded. Traditional language requires translation from abstract to concrete. KOHL bypasses that step. For neurotypes like Lysander's, it's more intuitive than spoken language. As evening approached, Thaddeus had mastered nearly 30 basic signals. The experience was revelatory. For the first time, he wasn't trying to make Lysander conform to conventional communication. Instead, he was entering his son's world of pure pattern and precision. "Why did you help him escape?" Thaddeus asked Azrael as Lysander worked nearby, arranging and rearranging papers in complex configurations. "You mentioned your daughter, but there must have been other reasons." Azrael was silent for a moment, her fingers tracing the scar on her hairline again, a gesture Thaddeus now recognized as unconscious. "I was Subject Zero," she finally said. "The prototype. 20 years ago, when the program was still theoretical, they identified adults with similar neurological profiles. I was in naval intelligence, already demonstrating advanced pattern recognition abilities." "They experimented on you," Thaddeus surmised. "Volunteered," Azrael corrected, though her tone suggested the distinction was meaningless. "The program director, Elliot Northcross, recruited me personally. We became involved. When I became pregnant, he saw an opportunity, a subject from conception with genetic predisposition from both parents. The implications settled heavily between them. Your daughter." "Subject 4, Azrael confirmed. "My pregnancy was monitored, every developmental stage documented. After she was born, I was transitioned from test subject to handler. By then, they'd begun identifying and acquiring other children with similar profiles, including Lysander." Azrael nodded. "He arrived when he was 4. Parents deceased in what was classified as an accident. His abilities were immediately apparent, even to those of us accustomed to exceptional pattern recognition." "What changed?" Thaddeus asked. "Why extract him after years in the program?" "Northcross authorized neural implants," Azrael said, her voice hardening. "Invasive procedures to enhance abilities that were already extraordinary. The first subject didn't survive. The second was left with permanent neurological damage. When Lysander was scheduled for the procedure, I made my choice." "But you couldn't take your daughter." "Security protocols," Azrael explained, regret evident in her voice. "Subjects were kept in separate facilities. I could only reach Lysander. The plan was to establish him safely, then return for her." "What stopped you?" "They changed security after Lysander's extraction, moved the remaining subjects to a new facility. It took me 3 years to locate them again." She looked at Thaddeus directly. "That's why we need your resources. And Lysander's abilities." Their conversation was interrupted by Lysander approaching, with a paper covered in what looked like star charts overlaid with mathematical equations. He placed it before Thaddeus and made a series of hand signals. Thaddeus concentrated, translating the movements he had learned. "Coordinates? He's showing us coordinates?" "Not just coordinates," Azrael replied, studying the paper. "It's the facility location, overlaid with their security protocols, translated into astronomical positioning." "How could he know this?" Thaddeus asked, amazed. "The activation signal in the dog tag," Azrael explained. "It wasn't just tracking him, it was connecting him to the central system. He's accessing their network through the pattern recognition pathways they built into his training." Lysander made another series of signs, more complex than the ones he'd taught his father. "What's he saying now?" Thaddeus asked. Azrael's expression shifted to something between awe and concern. "He says he can hear Subject 4, that she's sending him patterns, that she knows we're coming." "Is that possible?" "Theoretically," Azrael said. "The most advanced subjects demonstrated limited telepathic capabilities in controlled settings. Not mind reading, but pattern sharing across distance." The department dismissed it as inconclusive. Lysander's hands moved again in urgent patterns. "We need to move now," Azrael translated. "He says they're changing security protocols in 36 hours. This is our window." Thaddeus studied the star chart his son had created. "This facility is in Nevada, former military installation repurposed as a private research center. Black site," Azrael confirmed. "Off books, minimal digital footprint." "I can have a private jet ready in 3 hours," Thaddeus said. Decision made. "But getting into a facility like this, even with insider knowledge, will require resources I don't have immediate access to." Azrael moved to another case, entering a different security code. Inside was military-grade equipment, tactical gear, and communication devices. "I've been preparing for this for 3 years, Mr. Kincaid. What I've lacked was the location and access codes, which Lysander has just provided." "What exactly is your plan?" Thaddeus asked. Minimal team, minimal exposure, Azrael replied. We use Lysander's access to the system to breach the outer security perimeter. I navigate the internal layout. We extract the 4 remaining subjects, including my daughter, and retrieve the central database. And then, we expose everything, Azrael said simply. The experiments, the procedures, the violations of every ethical standard in medical and scientific research, with evidence directly from their database. Even the department's government connections won't protect them. Thaddeus considered the implications. They'll come after us. All of us. There will be nowhere safe. There's already nowhere safe, Azrael countered. Not while the program exists. Not while they're hunting these children. The only way out is through. Lysander moved to stand beside Azrael, making the sign for promise, followed by another Thaddeus didn't recognize. Freedom, Azrael translated softly. Promise freedom. Thaddeus looked at his son, seeing not the struggling, silent child he'd thought he'd adopted, but a remarkably capable individual who had been communicating all along, just in a language Thaddeus hadn't understood. How can I help? He asked simply. The preparations moved swiftly after that. Azrael's tactical experience combined with Thaddeus's resources created a plan that might actually work. While Thaddeus arranged transport and digital countermeasures, Azrael prepared equipment and briefed them on the facility layout she remembered. Lysander worked continuously, his hands moving in complex patterns as he accessed the system through pathways only he could navigate, extracting security codes, personnel rotations, and most critically, the exact location of the remaining subjects. As morning light streamed through the windows, Thaddeus watched his son working with a mixture of pride and concern. The boy he'd known for 3 years was still there, the same precise movements, the same focused attention to pattern and detail. But now, Thaddeus could see these traits not as limitations, but as extraordinary abilities he was only beginning to understand. Lysander looked up, sensing his father's gaze. His hands formed the now familiar patterns for safety, family, and promise. Thaddeus responded with the same signs, adding one more he had learned during their intensive session. Together. Lysander's face brightened with that rare smile that transformed his features. He stood, moving to join his father by the window overlooking the ocean. Side by side, they watched the waves, their hands occasionally moving in synchronous patterns. A father and son speaking a language that transcended words, built on mathematics and pattern and promise. Behind them, Azrael completed the final preparations for their mission, her determination fueled by the prospect of finally reaching her daughter. On the table lay the beginnings of a plan to save the other children, to expose the program, to ensure Lysander and the others could live without fear of recovery. The real work was just beginning, but for the first time in years, there was more than just hope driving them forward. There was understanding, connection, and the quiet certainty that comes from finally being truly seen.